OK, let's put all that climate change diplomacy to one side. It's embarrassing, illogical, economically damaging, but many other countries love it too. As silly as Albanese sounds talking about the naughty corner, if it is true that these left-of-centre leaders like President Joe Biden and Jacinda Ardern, well, they just love a bit of climate piety. And the Pacific Islands will continue to work the climate politics for all it's worth, using it to extract what they want from us, from China, from the US. So diplomatically, Albanese and Penny Wong's climate rhetoric obsession, it doesn't do any harm. In fact, it helps them. But I reckon that's the only annoyance about their foreign policy so far. I've got to say my biggest worry about a switch to Labor at this election was foreign policy, because neither major party was looking after the budget and both were committed to this net zero farce. So the biggest threat of damaging change at a precarious time was in the area of foreign policy and national security. And given Labor's history with Sam Dastyari and other luminaries like Bob Carr and Paul Keating always pushing Beijing's cause, and the fact that both Albanese and Wong are of the socialist left faction, typically sceptical about the US alliance and sanguine about the rise of communist China, well, given all that, we had reason to be worried. But so far, Albanese and Wong have been strong, clear and wise in their foreign policy. It started within days of the election when the new Prime Minister went to Tokyo for the Quad meeting with the US, Indian and Japanese leaders, and he made it clear he wouldn't be kowtowing to China.
We'll determine our own values. We'll determine Australia's future direction. It's China that's changed, not Australia.
Yeah, in the briefings for that trip and in the meetings themselves, Albanese and Wong would have been left in no doubt about the insidious Chinese agenda in our region or the vital importance of the US in resisting it. But Wong was only home long enough to change planes before hitting the South Pacific to counter China's wolf warrior diplomacy in the region. And she hit the mark immediately.
What do you think Australia's Pacific neighbours are wanting from us currently?
Well, what they want is more energy. They're getting that from this government.
Yeah, energy is good. The outgoing Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, was almost invisible, with national security and foreign policy issues so high on the agenda day in and day out. Payne was seldom heard from and had little to say when she did speak. Wong is already showing that she could turn out to be one of our better foreign ministers. She was back in the Pacific a second time within days, approving new aid deals, and the government sent 100 ADF personnel to help with training in Papua New Guinea. The weak link in Labor's national security team so far is Richard Marles, the Defence Minister, a right faction leader who should be strong on this stuff. But he's been talking nonsense over nuclear submarines, and he's also been blaming Australia under the coalition for our problems with China. Just the sort of rhetoric that Beijing loves to hear.
Peter Dutton took a hard line against China. Will you do the same?
We saw a lot of chest beating on the part of the former government. They were pretty good at their rhetoric, but in terms of what they actually did, managing the hard power equation, they were a complete failure. And so we're going to be focused much more on the doing than the saying.
Marles needs to realise he's in charge now and he needs to speak for Australia, not against it. But let's get back to the good news. Albanese has promised to attend the Pacific Islands Forum Leadership Summit and he'll get directly involved there with Pacific leaders later this year. And earlier this week, Albanese went to Indonesia with Wong, took along some business leaders and also some other ministers, including Ed Husic, who's one of our first two Muslim ministers. It was a smart two-day visit that set exactly the right tone with President Joko Widodo and the Jakarta establishment. And importantly, Albanese committed to attending the G20 summit in Bali later this year, regardless of whether or not Russia's Vladimir Putin turns up. This is a big deal for Indonesia because there have been calls for other nations to boycott in protest against Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
I'm focused on sitting with President Widodo, not sitting with President Putin. It is in Australia's interest to have good relations with our Indonesian friends. The Indonesian presidency of the G20 is an important moment for Indonesia.
That's the right decision, well expressed. Good diplomacy. It's good for Australia and it's good for Indonesia. Look, forgive me if I sound just a little bit surprised. And yes, it is early days and the tests in diplomacy will come thick and fast. But to me, it's very clear that Albanese and Wong have not just been strong and firm in keeping our key relationships and foreign policy settings on a trajectory that's consistent, that shows bipartisan continuity, but they've actually done that in a very clear and very firm manner and done it in such an energetic and pitch-perfect way that they've refreshed our relationships and our arguments on the global stage. We're going to see some chaos on climate and energy here at home. Of that, there can be no doubt. But Albanese and Wong have delivered a high-powered start on foreign policy at a time of great peril. First impressions matter in diplomacy, and they've made them count.